The following has been recorded at Cairn University. Any reproduction of this recording without the express permission of the university is prohibited.
Thanks for honoring me with this opportunity to share my vision of ministry outside the United States. It's great to be back at Cairn 45 years after graduating. If you remember nothing of my 30 minutes today, I hope you'll carry Zechariah 4:6 with you. Don't look it up now. I stumbled upon this passage when I was living in London, and it was a particularly difficult time of my life. I had a job that wasn't very satisfying. My husband was dying and in a London hospital, and every day I'd walk to work in the dark. I'd run home from work in the dark, jump on my bicycle, and race down a London sidewalk to get to the hospital. This was 1995. The streets of London were not safe for bicycles, as they are, relatively speaking, today. Usually, at least on the way home, one little old lady would wag her finger at me and say, "You're not supposed to be on the sidewalk," and I'd kind of cringe and get away as quickly as possible, of course. This Zechariah 4:6 was a message from God, came to Zechariah via an angel speaking in a vision, nothing like direct communication, right? And he told it to the governor of Judah, a man named Zerubbabel, Governor Z. Now, Israel had been captive in Babylon for 70 years. God commanded them to rebuild the temple. They'd been back for 20 years, still no temple. As a former public servant, I can just imagine the conversation in Zerubbabel's mind, or what he even said to Zechariah. Probably went something like, "Listen, this is not part of my job description. I will never get promoted for rebuilding the temple. Everyone here wants water, electricity, internet connections, houses. They really don't care about the temple. So this is a career killer. I'll never again get another promotion." So Zechariah came to Governor Z and said, "Gov, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord of hosts. You will succeed because of my spirit, though you are few and weak." This message has been very encouraging to me because I'm few. I'm just one. I'm 5 feet tall, so I'm a little bit weak. So this has meant a lot to me. I'm speaking today to two groups. If you're one of these people who, like me, wants to live in a different place, go overseas, meet new people, you want to understand how 96% of the world's population, the people who live outside the US, are thinking. Then my goal is to challenge you to become a tent maker abroad, especially in the developing world, and even better in a denied area like Cuba, Saudi Arabia, the former Soviet Union, where the gospel is not freely spoken and very few of the people have even heard it. For those of you who are not called to live outside the 50 states, I challenge you to pray for your friends who go as tent makers, because those of us who go out, not sponsored by Team or Send or a traditional mission, we have every bit the need of prayer, but don't have the same prayer support in general. Now, if you fall outside these two categories, you neither want to work outside the US or work in it, then feel free to resume your texting or whatever. I was a bit of an oddball at Cairn. I didn't feel called to be a teacher in a Christian school, certainly didn't want to marry a preacher, didn't want to work at a rescue mission, but I felt called to be a counselor of college students. Actually, I majored in scroll. I didn't run fast enough. I just wanted to write feature stories, and no one wanted to be the editor that year, and I was the slowest runner, so they caught me. So if any of you work for the Scroll, I'd love to talk to you about what it's like today, because I think you have a pretty fine organization and publication. So fortunately, I had a great mentor at Cairn, and he encouraged me in my counseling role, and I went to Columbia University. I finished one degree there, and then because I was hired on the faculty, I got to take courses for a second degree in counseling free. How a Bible college grad got one of two scholarships in my department when the deciders were either gay or Jewish or both is a real sign to me of God's provision. Similarly, in between Cairn and Columbia, I worked for a year in Philadelphia for Youth for Christ. Now, during that year, I had the opportunity to raise my own support, actually before the year started, and decided pretty quickly that raising support was just not my shtick. It was not for me. But only 1 month out of 12 did I fall a little bit short of the financial goals set for me. So again, early in my career, God showed me, Nancy, I am faithful. I am going to provide for you. And he did. After 4 years in New York, where I worked at Columbia, I ran away from home and never went back. I went to Spain, where I taught English in a business school for Spanish adults who wanted to learn English so they could do better in their work. It was a survival level job, as many jobs teaching English abroad are, paid all of $250 a month. But for me, it was a foot in the door of being an expat abroad, which I warn you is addictive. An expat or expatriate is someone who works and lives abroad, outside his native country. I was fascinated by the different priorities and the life views that my Spanish friends had. After I tired of eating noodles and tomatoes, because that's all I could afford, I got hired to run youth activities at an Air Force base near Madrid. My Christian Ed at Cairn training came in handy for managing youth activities, which included announcing the play-by-play at the youth football games, a game about which I know zero. So that was interesting. You athletes would appreciate some of the calls I made. After 2 years doing that, I was nearly hired as a guidance counselor at the Madrid International School, but fortunately, I got into the Foreign Service. After 31 years and 13 different assignments, I retired in 2010 to see the world. So, I'm an international gypsy, we've established that. But how did my faith play out? Well, it took different forms in different assignments. We'll start with the hardest, but the most interesting and rewarding post for me, which was Saudi Arabia, which is a denied area. There, along with the Air Force attaché, I established a small but thriving international church, which of course was underground because churches are not permitted in Saudi Arabia. In addition, I was able to bring in about 400 Bibles from Abu Dhabi, where my husband stayed, into the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And these were in different languages and went to various Indian, Ethiopian, Pakistani congregations that were meeting in secret. About 1/4 of the population of Saudi when I was there were actually expats. Some were believers, some weren't, but they were really turned off by Wahhabi Islam as it's practiced in the kingdom. Guest workers there from the poor countries were told, don't bring your Bibles or you won't get in. They'll keep you out of the country. Since in many cases they were supporting extended families back home and maybe 8 to 12 people were depending on their very small paycheck, most people didn't risk bringing their Bibles if they were from a poor country. If they brought one, they hid it under their bed, someplace in their dormitory, and didn't dare carry it with them to the place where they went to meet with other believers. So a lot of the churches that were meeting had one Bible for maybe 20 people. In the embassy, we had about 45 drivers. They took us to official meetings. If we were women, they took us everywhere, because in Saudi, women are not permitted to drive. So every Christmas and Easter, my housekeeper, who was a lovely Filipina believer who had come to Christ through World Vision when her father died, we baked things. I brought this great chocolate. Oh my goodness, Rocky Mountain chocolate is kind of like the Godiva of Colorado, and we actually had some in Abu Dhabi. So packed these really nice little gift bags with a card with a note and either a Gospel of John or a New Testament in the language of the driver. No one ever complained, even the Hindus who got them. We didn't give them to the Muslims. I only gave them to about half the drivers who I calculated were not Muslim. No one ever complained because that stuff was nice. A couple months later, one Friday, which was our day off, I was going into the office to work, and as I entered the lobby of the embassy, 3 painters were painting it. I asked them if they wanted Cokes because it was a hot day in the desert. When I came down from my office with the sodas, one of the men said, "Oh, are you Miss Nancy?" Yeah. He said, "Oh, Miss Nancy, my son is here and he's really far from God. So I gave him the Bible that you gave me for Christmas, I gave to him, and he's been reading it." And then he proceeded to thank me over and over for having done this. Well, I don't know about you, but when God chooses to bring to my attention or let me know how some small act of obedience has turned out well, I'm profoundly grateful. So it was I who owed the gratitude to him and to God. In the Gulf, we are not permitted to openly evangelize. By the way, when I say the Gulf, I mean the Arabian Gulf, which you all call the Persian Gulf, and I just call it the Gulf. So that's the area I'm talking about. Saudi Arabia, UAE, which includes Abu Dhabi and Dubai, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, and Qatar. Those are the Gulf countries in my mind. So we weren't permitted to evangelize, but if people ask us questions, we could answer. Of course, we became very good at saying things that were provocative so that people would ask us questions. And they did, sometimes every day, at least every week. So what professions could you take overseas to be a tent maker, especially to the Gulf? I've already alluded to government work. The U.S. military, the U.S. Agency for International Development, the Foreign Service are just a couple possibilities if you want to work for the U.S. government. Within the Foreign Service, the State Department and the largest, they probably have about 15,000 officers, communicators, security personnel in about 200 countries. But there are lots of other possibilities. Agriculture, development aid, commercial, and intel services also serve overseas. The military groups that I've had most experience with was probably the Attaché Corps. But I have great respect for military chaplains. 2 of the chaplains who helped us out with preaching at our underground church were men. One was a policeman and the other was a computer specialist, went back to seminary at about age 40 and became military chaplains. They helped us immensely. Then, of course, there's teaching overseas. Again, at a Department of Defense school for military children, international or American school, they are different, or a university. Education and oil riches in the Gulf are quite new. So you have a number of US universities, including NYU, American U, Georgetown, and Carnegie Mellon that have campuses there. They all recruit inside the US for their Gulf campuses. International organizations like the UN, World Bank, World Health Organization, these groups probably pay the best for all the overseas overjobs, other than possibly the private sector, but they're also the hardest for an American to get into. Along the way, I had a lot of friends who worked for oil companies. If I were doing it again and couldn't be a commercial officer, helping US companies sell their products abroad, I'd probably work for an oil company. For ministry purposes, in my way of thinking, Aramco in Saudi Arabia would be my first choice. What a dark country, Saudi Arabia. And the opportunities for evangelism there or for ministry of any kind are absolutely limitless. But the national oil or gas companies of any of the other Gulf countries would also be up there, or even an American oil company. They hire HR folks, facilities managers, environmental specialists, and of course, engineers. And they treat their people very well. Finally, you can work for a multinational business right here in the Philadelphia area. Be their star. My son-in-law, who's in Colorado, works for an Australian medical device company, and he's been offered jobs in both, I think, Sweden and Australia, which he's turned down. My stepson, just north of here in New Hope, works for a European chemical company, and he's also been invited to go overseas, but has declined. U.S. and multinational banks, law and accounting firms, hospitals, and other exporters all send key individuals abroad. They send Americans abroad to help train the locals in the corporate culture and to manage. One of my friends in Saudi Arabia, a businessman, said, "Oh yes, we like to hire Americans to come and manage our projects because they're very good administrators." He said, "And beside, we need someone to take the blame when the project goes south." I have a very bittersweet story of a friend of mine who used to be an official in PNC Bank, who went to the Gulf, was blamed for a $1 billion bank loss, and in the process came to the Lord. And I'd love to share that if we meet privately or in small groups afterwards. It's a beautiful story, again, of God's providence. I've had friends abroad with non-government organizations, including World Vision, Samaritan's Purse, World Relief, and Amnesty International. No Greenpeace friends yet. You're probably asking, okay, I got it. Over 95% of the world's population lives outside the US, and the penetration of the gospel is certainly not as great in most other countries. But why take my skills overseas? First, a few reasons not to. I always back into things the opposite way. Once you've studied or worked overseas, am I still on? Can you hear me? Good, thank you, okay. Once you've worked abroad, I warn you, you'll never be the same. You may always be a little bit restless. Most of my friends who've been overseas say that by far the hardest thing was coming back to the US. Much more difficult coming back than the first year out. I think we call it reverse culture shock. Another reason not to go, medical facilities overseas are different and often, especially in the developing world, they're inferior to the US. My first husband probably would have had his cancer diagnosed earlier had he not been in Taiwan when the symptoms first arose. My second husband got dengue fever in Central America. It was no picnic, and got probably less comprehensive treatment for his various ills during the 12 years he was in Abu Dhabi. The hardest part for me was being away from family. My mother's last year of her life was my first year in a new job, working for the Commerce Department in Taiwan. So I didn't have the credit built up to come home often, and I would have preferred being assigned to the States, but that was not possible at that time. Now that I value friends more than ever, it's peculiar that none of my lifelong friends live in Denver, which is tough because that's where I spend half my time. When you move every 2 to 4 years, as you do in the Foreign Service or any job that requires mobility, you're focused on the here and now, so it was a struggle just to keep in touch with even one person from a previous assignment. I just spent 2 months shredding papers, documents as far back as 1989. Now that's before you millennials were even born, but if you've watched your parents empty out a basement or garage after living in the same place for 30, 40 years, you'll probably agree that having to cut back on stuff every 2 to 4 years is really not such a bad idea. Something that suffered early in my career was my walk with the Lord. I tried to go native and go to a Spanish or Chinese-speaking church in Spain or Hong Kong. The Foreign Service Institute does a great job training us in how to argue current affairs in the language that we're supposed to be working in, but my Bible vocabulary was pretty dismal. About 10 years in, I finally got it. Yeah, I'm a slow learner. I'm sure you guys will get it faster. About 6 months before a move, my small group would begin praying with me about the new assignment. I'd make a contact inside that country and line up a Bible study, a church, some group to hold me accountable when I first got there. I didn't spend the first year kind of church hunting and looking for a place to fit in. Frankly, that's what I miss most about being stateside. A heterogeneous group of believers from everywhere in the world that really enriched my life in London, Indonesia, San Salvador, South Africa, and then finally the 3 countries of the Gulf where I served. Finally, when I joined the Foreign Service at age 30, we were told, if you're a single woman and you join the Foreign Service, don't ever expect to get married. Your chances of getting married once you go abroad in the Foreign Service are less than being killed by a terrorist. Now, this was 1979, so the 9/11 hadn't happened. It was a generation before most of you were born, the Dark Ages. So we thought this was pretty funny at the time. Ha ha. But a Foreign Service doctor, friend of mine, was killed by a Pakistani terrorist outside his office in Washington, D.C. in the 90s. So suddenly, the odds of being killed by a terrorist were not so funny anymore. But there are a lot of single women in the Foreign Service, and many of the ambassadors in Africa are single women. I didn't plan to marry, but did so at age 37 and 51. But in both cases, it was to a man that I met while living in the States. As in anything in life, we don't always get what we expect. I visited Saudi Arabia to see whether I could possibly live and work there as a woman. During the visit, a group of Saudi businesswomen, learning that my husband was a psychologist, said, "Oh, Nancy, you've got to come here. We really need your husband." So I went back, and Jim and I prayed long and hard, and finally I bid on and got Saudi Arabia so that he could counsel a bunch of sick Saudis. 2 months before our assignment was to begin, 2 American defense contractors in Riyadh were killed by al-Qaeda terrorists. So the government decided that only I could go because it wasn't safe for families. So there I am, after volunteering for one of the world's weirdest countries, so that my husband could have access, I go alone, without him. Lots of strange and funny things happened during my 2 years in Saudi, and I'd love to share them with you if we get some time in small groups. Probably the most memorable was when I got the best of the religious police, who stopped me because I wasn't wearing the abaya or the shayla that all women were supposed to wear in the kingdom. Which brings me finally to the benefits of working abroad that you thought I'd never get here. Let me say out front that if you want to make a difference, go to a developing country. Even better, go to a developing country that has a small penetration of the gospel. My least satisfying job was in London, and my most interesting and satisfying jobs were probably in Saudi and Azerbaijan, where I went just after the Soviet Union was dissolved. Most couples need 2 incomes to survive. And it may be difficult if you have teenagers to get them to leave their friends to go with you to Cuba or to a country in Africa. So go when they're young, before they're too young to know any better. Put up a serious fight. The good news is international schools in most major cities have a great standard of education and a wonderful track record getting kids into good U.S. colleges. If you're called to be a missionary abroad, and your sending agency is an oil company, the U.S. government, or international humanitarian group, you will spend some time in preparation for the assignment, often language study. You'll be paid for by the employer. They'll pay your way to, they'll pay your way to post. They will pay you a nice salary when you're there. They often pay for you to come home once a year. And if you're not working for the U.S. government, the first $80,000 to $90,000 of your salary will be tax-free in the U.S. If you work for Uncle Sam, you can't escape taxes. Instead of spending weeks, years raising support, and then warming up your supporters every so often, you'll spend your time working and ministering. However, you still need to send occasional messages to those praying for you so that they know how to best support you. In general, during my 13 foreign assignments, I've had far more opportunities to share the gospel than I ever did in the US. I won't belabor how US laws now are making it difficult for us to verbally share Christ at work. You could probably give me some of your own horror stories. I worked for the last year in the Arabian Gulf. A Jewish Middle East specialist approached me when I was in London, yes. He knew that I was bored work-wise. He advised me to bid on Abu Dhabi. They'll love you, he said. We've never had a woman in a senior commercial officer in Abu Dhabi. I know you, you'll do well. For those of you who know anything about me, all I have to hear is, no woman has done this before, and I'm in. I'm all in. So in Abu Dhabi, we went. In Abu Dhabi, my husband found work as a psychologist at a private clinic and then started his own practice. Within 10 years, he had 3,000 clients, most of them non-Christian. He was the only American counselor with a doctorate in practice at the time. The Arabs trusted him, specifically because he wasn't Arab. Says something about the culture, doesn't it? Actually, quite a bit. In 2002, Jim and I began praying that God would send a woman Christian counselor to Abu Dhabi. Finally, in 2010, Salwa, an Egyptian American with a fresh master's in counseling, arrived with her husband, who worked for an oil services company. The Abu Dhabi health authorities had no category for counselor, so they turned her down for a license. Dr. Yusuf, now I want you to listen closely to this. Dr. Yusuf was a Syrian Muslim psychiatrist who founded the American Counseling Center. Go figure. But he wanted to hire her. I will say in Dr. Yusuf's behalf, he did some kind of short course at Harvard, so there was a slim American connection. He wanted to hire Selwa, so he lobbied the health authorities. And Selwa went every day, and I think they just wanted to get rid of her, so they gave her a license and put it under the public health category. She's got a thriving practice, but I assure you that when she and her husband retire and go home to Texas in 1 to 3 years, Dr. Yusuf will be madly scrambling for a replacement. So counseling majors, think about that. At our church, my husband taught a course called Counseling for Lay Leaders. About 60 people took it. One of those students is now getting his master's degree and hopes to counsel at the same clinic in Abu Dhabi. It's expensive to live in the Gulf, so probably neither Selwa nor my husband could have afforded the rent to minister there had they not been what we call trailing spouses. That's one of the words we use to talk about the person who goes with the employee. That's one reason I'd encourage many of you to consider an assignment in the Gulf. The unlimited opportunities for a couple where only one person needs or has to have a salary. I've alluded to international churches. Usually there's at least one English-speaking Protestant church in any major city. So you get to worship with charismatics, Anglicans, Baptists, the full range of non-Catholics. Having said that, there were 2 Catholic couples who came to our church that we had in Saudi Arabia. One of them was key to distributing the Bibles to workers around the kingdom of Saudi Arabia because he traveled a lot. The ECC, or Evangelical Community Church in Abu Dhabi, is a great example of God's faithfulness. It grew out of a hospital started about 60 years ago by Team. In the 90s, some of the English-speaking staff, Christians, were meeting in a house, but the government made it illegal to have a house group. So they went to the then leader, Sheikh Zayed, and requested help, and he actually gave them land. The tiny congregation built a small church, which they promptly outgrew, and they've been enlarging it ever since. I left Abu Dhabi in 2004 to become the first woman commercial counselor in Saudi. There were about 30 groups using the building. When I returned in 2013, 2 years ago, there were over 100 groups using the same building, which has been enlarged many times. The pastor of the ECC is retiring this year. And usually there are 2 or 3 other pastors that are from the States. It's not the American church. It is international, but a lot of the leadership is American. The church has about 25 nationalities from every continent but Antarctica. And many of them are from far-flung places that you don't usually associate with a lot of Christians. A lot of people get saved there. There was a ministry to Chinese people. They now have their own Chinese church. There was a group of Nepalese. A friend of mine started a Bible study, and now there's a Nepalese congregation. Several missionaries that I've supported in my career have struggled on ways to meet people and for evangelism. Why are you here? How do you support yourself? Their neighbors want to know. Well, when your sending agency is Johns Hopkins Hospital or UPS, it's clear who sent you. People don't pay a lot of attention to the spouse, giving him or her free rein to run amok for the kingdom, I think. With the salary and housing provided, and often a yearly trip home, expat employment is one of the few areas where a family can truly survive on one income. As a result, ECC in Abu Dhabi had a great bookstore manager. Her husband worked for an engineering firm. And the children's ministry director was also an unsalaried trailing spouse. My job did not get in the way of ministry as much as it enhanced it. People wanted to know someone from the embassy. And in the Gulf, I got at least one question a week, usually more, asking what I believed, why I chose to follow Christ, why it was important to me. My husband had to be circumspect in counseling Muslims, but found much more freedom in the UAE and in Kuwait than he ever had in Denver, Colorado. One client told Jim, if I were going to follow Jesus as God, not just as a prophet, I'd have to move to Canada. Most Muslim families will either reject or in some cases try to kill the convert. So his group of acquaintances used going to Canada as their code word for becoming a Christian. Jim had a Hindu couple that saw him for counseling, and they did become Christians and physically moved to Canada, where they're now actively involved in a local church. 2 teens, a Palestinian and a Somali youth, found a Bible, got curious, started to read it, became Christians. Then their parents found out, and so they had to go on the run. One of them actually was hiding out with my husband until he could escape. In one of the more bizarre baptism stories, my husband baptized a Karachi, Pakistani man who got away to Dubai for the weekend in a Dubai hotel bathtub. This guy had become a Christian over the internet through a couple in Montana. And he's still in Karachi, and they're still in communication with him. I have just misplaced my notes. Okay. Finally, for those of you who are Dallas or Trinity bound, after seminary and a few years of pastoring, please consider working as a military chaplain or in one of the international churches in most of the world's major cities. A Denver seminary grad, who's a friend of mine, started the St. Paul's Cultural Center in Turkey, in a city called Antalya. Lovely place right on the Mediterranean Sea. He's now taking a year off to finish his doctorate, and while doing that, he's pastoring the International Church in Amsterdam. Not a bad job. This winter, I attended a great church in Paris called The Bridge. It's 3 years old. I went there to cat sit, by the way. If you've got a house sit, do it in Paris. This church is 3 years old, has about 60 different nationalities in attendance, and the pastor's from Louisiana. Of course, I'm partial to the Arabian Gulf. Dubai and Abu Dhabi, which are in the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, Kuwait, all have great churches for non-locals. Most of the missionaries I knew there, well, all of the missionaries I knew there were tent makers. None called themselves missionaries. My church in Kuwait grew out of a missionary hospital, and Through it, I worked with the Salvation Army couple that came there while I was posted in Kuwait, and they ran a home for Ethiopian maids who were abused by their Kuwaiti employers and had to run away. Similarly, the wife of the naval attaché and I led a Bible study at a group for 200 Filipina maids who'd escaped their truly evil employees. The situation of maids and construction workers from the third world in the Arabian Gulf is too large a story for me to share at this time and place. But let me just say that in the treatment of unskilled workers, the treatment of unskilled workers in the Gulf is a Texas-sized scar on the dignity of each of those countries. If God calls you to a justice ministry, consider going to these rich but spiritually bankrupt countries located between Iran and Saudi Arabia. There's lots of work to do there. Finally, if any of you are interested in the Foreign Service, please see me. As I believe someone said, I'll be at the Highlander after 2 today and most of tomorrow, and the advancement at alumni office can put you in touch with me. In 30 years in the Foreign Service, I never met one other Bible college graduate. In my orientation class for the Foreign Service, there were 4 of us who we knew were Christians. 1 went to Wheaton, 1 went to Calvin. But my goal is to have at least one of you all become a Foreign Service officer, and I can certainly get you started on that. My first assignment was a 6-month tour in Argentina. 2 senior officers were underlapping, so they found someone available, a rank amateur, yours truly, to go and kind of stick her finger in the dike for 6 months. I got to do a job that was usually reserved for people with 10 to 14 years of experience. It was a great introduction to the next 30 years, and I loved everything about Argentina. So I leave you with a challenge from someone born in Argentina, Luis Palau, an evangelist from there who recently held a crusade, I believe, in New York's Central Park. Luis reminds us, God does not call the qualified. He qualifies the called. Remember, not by might nor by power, but by God's Spirit, you will succeed. Thank you very much.